Welcome back. You are listening to episode number 38 of the Cream City Club podcast. I'm Spencer Michaelis, and I'm here, as always, with Gunnar Amalunk. Gunnar, how are you doing this Monday evening?
Good. I was in Nashville over the weekend attending my sister's wedding. So shout out to Capri and Derek for getting married. Um, Spencer, I'm sure, unless you got secretly married over the weekend, I don't think you can top that. But how was your weekend, Spencer?
I got secretly married last weekend, so we already missed the boat on talking about
I
that.
knew it's going to happen at some
Yeah.
point. So
Yep.
yeah. Thanks for
So
the invite.
I got secretly divorced on Monday, though, so we're
Oh,
already
crap.
through the full stage. We're fine. Um, no, I mean I've been doing some coaching. That's been most of my life lately is just baseball, watching baseball, coaching baseball, which is fun. I like baseball. We're gonna talk about some baseball in a few
Sure.
minutes here. So, if you are listening and you haven't yet subscribed, please take a moment to do so on whatever platform you are on, and to rate us 5 stars. Follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod to stay up to date on these episode releases. And as you may have guessed, today is going to be a Brewers focused episode. So, Gunnar, what do we got coming up?
We're going to be talking about the weekend series that we played against the Orioles. I'm not going to go back into last week. As you guys know, Spencer and Jack do have a new podcast, so go check that out, but they probably covered those games. Um, and then we're going to have a deeper dive into some of our younger guys who are struggling right now. We're going to be talking about them probably throughout these games as well, but hopefully by the end, we'll give you a nice deep dive into our thoughts and why they're maybe struggling right now. And then we had some roster shuffling news. I want to say maybe Saturday night, Sunday morning, going into that third game. We'll break down what those moves mean to us right now. And then we asked the Twitter for some more questions. We got a couple of those that we'll be answering too throughout the podcast. So since we've last spoken on this podcast, the Brewers have gone 6-3. Um, we'll start here with game one against the Orioles. Uh, some highlights here in this one. I'll just quickly run it through before I kick it to Spencer and my thoughts on these highlights. We did win this game pretty handedly, 11-1 behind Freddie Peralta's dominant. Again, he's just been electric this season. Dominant start from him, 6 innings, 11 strikeouts, one earned run, and he really only had one maybe scar in his performance, and that was a slider that he hung. I want to say that guy's name was Kauser. I think they moo every time he comes up to bat. That's their signature thing for him, but. I think that was also the first hit off of a slider off of him. So that was the one that he hung, and the guy did not miss it, and he smoked it out of here for a home run. But outside of that, he was perfect in this one. We also woke up the Sanchez. Is that what we're calling them, Spencer? It looks like.
Yes.
I love that nickname for him. But yeah, he turned on one on a high and away fastball that wasn't even a strike. He hit a monster home run to get him going in the Brewers uniform finally. And then Willie Adames, he set off some fireworks in this one as well. Just missed one that high now high left field wall. He hit right out the top of that one in the a bat before. Next at bat, he did not miss it, but even that one just snuck out of here. And then after that, we had some fireworks, as I mentioned, where I want to say I'm not even sure how it really happened. It was the whole next at bat, so I think McCann was maybe mad because he did pimp the home run, and I think he was carrying that over into the next at bat. And Willie got a infield hit, I want to say, came around to score on maybe a Sal base hit or one of those guys into right, and then Willie gave him a nice stare down, which was nice to see. I think that's the type of baseball I love too with Willie is he always he plays hard, he hits home runs, but it didn't break out into a fight. It didn't get past the point of competitiveness, which that's the kind of baseball I like. Guys playing hard. Brewers love to steal. He's one of those guys too, which you were seeing a lot of different guys run this season. I just like that type of baseball. William Contreras, who's just been on fire now, finally showing the power. We'll talk about him a lot through these three games. And then Joey Ortiz got his revenge game. Started this one out with a triple, which was his first at bat against his old team. He's been punching a crap ton of balls to right field, balls that he really shouldn't even get a good piece of it on. And he's just smoking it to right field, and that one was no shortage in that. And yeah, I mean, that was pretty much the wrap up for the highlights offensively. But Spencer, I'll kick it to you for the pitching as far as bullpen goes, and then maybe if you have any other comments on these highlights offensively.
Yeah, I mean, it was Freddie obviously got through six fantastic innings, like you said. JP Bukowskis came in, had a clean inning with a strikeout, and then Thiago Vieira, who's been kind of the mop-up guy when we have big leads so far, came in and got threw 2 more shutout innings. So it's been the pen's been up and down so far for sure. We'll talk about Bukauskas a little later, unfortunately, with some injury news, but it was kind of starting to look like he was going to be an important part of the pen. So sucks to lose him because he's looked very good whenever he's gotten an opportunity. I think Vieira's looked very good every time he's gotten an opportunity. The ERA doesn't look great right now because of a 2-run homer he gave up in that Mariners game, but he was at the end of his he was done. He had no stamina left. If you were playing MLB The Show, he would have had a big exclamation point next to his bar because he should not have been out there for a third inning, but with the lead the Brewers had, they figured, why use another pitcher? Let's let him get through this inning and just finish the game off, even if he does give up a run or two in the process. But it's been up and down. We'll talk about it again when we get to Game 3, especially. But I do want to touch on the Willie little dust up with James McCann, I guess we'll call it. I don't understand what McCann was upset about. Even on the home run, Willie did not really pimp it at all. Like, he
No,
gave a little bit of a bat toss, and then he kind of skipped into his jog. But that's really, if you're getting upset about that, like you're getting upset about every single home run celebration anybody has, because that was pretty. I was just a normal home run trot. I thought he got around the bases pretty quick. It was weird. I guess if your last name is McCann and you're a catcher, you have to be offended by everybody doing
that
anything
was my
against.
first thought exactly when I saw McCann do that. And I think he's had a couple of dust ups in the past, but I think their broadcast, looking at the highlights again after, because I had to rewatch the game, obviously, I was at a wedding, but I think their broadcast was like, yeah, he's backing up his pitcher, which I guess he was getting shelled or their team was getting shelled. So in that way, he's backing him up. But yeah, like he dropped his bat. Maybe he didn't run hard out of the box. Like I said, he got all of it, but it also went only 2 rows up. So it wasn't like he smoked it. But that's more of a Brewers problem if we want to yell at him for not running or something. But I don't know what that. We didn't direct anything at their dugout or anything, which was weird.
No, not at all. I was shocked that that was what he was taking issue with. I heard somebody say that he thought the Brewers were hearing the pitch comm signals, like that they were too loud. And I don't know where that theory came from, but even if that is the case, that's
That's your
your
problem.
fault. Turn
Yeah.
it down. Like, why would you be upset at the Brewers for just listening? You want them to plug their ears when they get in the box? Like, that'd be the dumbest thing ever. So I don't know where that came from, but if that really was the case, that's even worse than what McCann was upset with the home run trot. And then, like you said, Willie with a pretty smooth slide into home and a little bit of a glare at McCann as he crossed home that was a nice way to top it off. Without, again, like you said, he didn't cross any lines. He didn't do anything that would put him or the team in jeopardy of some sort of suspension or even getting thrown at or something. There was no reason for them to go after him for any of it.
Mhm.
But yeah, this team's definitely just been playing a fun brand of baseball so far, and we'll talk about it as we go through this, how sustainable some of it is, but it's fun to watch, and the offense is playing hard. They're hitting the ball hard. They're hitting extra base hits. They're stealing bases when they don't hit extra base hits. It's very fun to watch at the moment, and I mean, we'll take that right into Game 2 when the offense just picked up right where it left off with another 11-run output, winning that game 11-5. Big time pickup of DL Hall, who really struggled in his return to Baltimore. Obviously, one of the main pieces in the Corbin Burnes trade. He only made it through 3 1/3 with 5 earned runs. Kind of got beat up by the long ball. They're hitting the fastball every time he threw it. It was getting crushed. It's We'll talk about him a little bit later, but I want to urge people before we even dig into any of this that he is in his 4th start of his major league career. I think there's something a little off with him right now. No, it doesn't look great right now, but I think we got to give him quite a bit more time before we start pulling the plug or hitting the panic button. Let's let this play out and see how things keep going. But like I said, in the end, the struggles were covered up by another really big offensive game. We got Jake Bauers hitting his first Brewers home run, starting to show a little bit of the power that I think we anticipate him having and showing a little bit more often as we move forward. That was a go-ahead 3-run homer to take the 8-5 lead. Rhys Hoskins hit his 3rd homer. That was to bring it back to 3-1 earlier in the game when the Brewers had gotten down right away. And then Sal Frelick had a pretty big 2-run double that kind of felt like it put the game out of reach. Line drive to left center. I shouldn't say 2-run double, just a double, but then he was driven in on two-run double by Adames. But Willie actually had one more that was almost a home run. Would have been a home run at every other field, but because of Baltimore's wall, It was just a fly out to the warning track. And I gotta say, I can't imagine watching 81 games at that park with that fence. It's ridiculous. 380 to straightaway left and a tall fence at that is unreal. That
Yeah.
should not be a
I
thing.
mean, the wind must blow out there because they changed it on purpose to do that. So there has to be some type of stat why they chose it to be like that. Because I don't know why. I like you said, I would hate watching that. It's incredible.
It took until like game 30 last year for a righty to hit a homer there. It was ridiculous. Or not there, but to left
Hmm.
field. Um, I don't know. I know I think actually part of it was Gleyber Torres just continued to hit home runs against them every time he went there. And before they went from like one extreme to the other because it was a really small field and left before with a short fence, like a normal fence. And there were a ton of home runs, but could have moved it back like 15 feet and raised the wall instead of 40. Like, I don't know. It was so, it was just felt like an overreaction in terms of moving the fence. And then it's 376 in left center. Like it's shorter to left center than it is to left. That never happens anywhere. So, watching a lot of at bats there when the Brewers were hitting the ball pretty hard to left, and it was like, yep, that's not going out. It was a little annoying, but I guess they had to deal with it too. So, but we should quickly talk about after DL Hall's struggles, the bullpen came in and just completely shut the game down right where it was. Like I said, Hall gave up 5 earned and 3 1/3. Elvis Peguero, Brian Hudson, Bukowskis, Milner, and Piamps came in 5 2/3 of shutout baseball afterwards. So that was huge. I mean, one, to just see the bullpen perform like that. We've seen it in the past a lot, but two, just to, again, it's great to see the team pick up Hall when he is struggling early on because I do think down the road he's going to win some games for the Brewers when maybe the offense doesn't show up or the bullpen might not be great. I do think he's eventually going to get to that point, but right now, while he's struggling as a young starter, to not have that end in a loss, that's pretty big, and it's really good to see. So, Gunnar, what did you have any thoughts on that game?
No, I mean, we should have mentioned probably, I don't know if you mentioned it too. Yelich was hurt, obviously, in game one of that one. So carrying that over, um, that was our first scare. Then we didn't get to see him in this one. Yeah, I mean, Hoskins staying hot, staying steady for us, really. It's like he's not getting too high, too low. He's just being exactly what we want him to be this season, constantly hitting the ball hard. You mentioned Bowers too. It's good to see that the bat actually came through, but his glove, I don't even know if it's underrated right now because everyone seems to notice it, but he had another big diving play, I think, in this one to turn two or at least save a hit. Um,
Yeah.
Not to mention just countless plays at first. It's the opposite hot corner. It seems like he gets a lot of shots over there, and he is always just a vacuum. So, um, yeah, I mean, the other two guys who I obviously want to mention, but we're going to talk about them later more in depth. But Jackson had a rough series in this one. Jackson Chourio, I think by the end of this one, is probably a 1 for 11, 1 for 10. And then of course Hall struggles, which I'm glad you mentioned the fastball because that was going to be my dumb question. It seemed like just not a lot of life on it really in this one, or that plus bad placement against a really good offensive team. So just a really bad mix there. But the bullpen was definitely the MVP, and you kind of forget this was a comeback win because they got off to a good start. And then our offenses took off, I believe. So, yeah, I mean, we saw a lot of good things in the offense. I got some fun stats by the end of these 3 games that I'll share team wise. But by far our best offense that I believe that we've had in years, it seems like. And if we can keep it up, 3 guys struggling. We'll also mention some other names throughout the podcast, but we just have so many options right now and guys stepping up, and that's what you want really throughout a lineup and throughout a bench.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess we should note the Orioles defense really played a nice role in the 3-run inning to tie the game up. They were struggling on a couple ground balls. The Brewers had some pretty good batted ball luck in that inning with a couple bloopers. But in the past, it's felt like the Brewers maybe don't take advantage of that opportunity when things are going their way.
Hmm.
And seeing them capitalized on those mistakes and on some of the good luck with some actual hard hit balls to capitalize, that was good to see. Just kind of another sign of an offense that's definitely improved. Um, those numbers you're going to read later, I'm sure I know at least some of them. Again, I want to warn people the Brewers are not going to be, I shouldn't say that as a matter of fact, but it'd be pretty shocking to me if the Brewers are going to be a top 3 offense in baseball by the end of the season.
Yeah.
But right now, they have a very good process and a process that feels repeatable. And a lineup that's definitely a lot more talented than it has been in the past. So I do think they're going to be a much improved offense. They just might not be one of the absolute best in baseball all
Oh yeah.
season, but it's been really good to see a nice approach up and down the lineup. It feels like the lineup fits together pretty well right now, especially when everyone's healthy. So it's been fun, and it showed in those first two games. And then honestly, it still kind of showed in game three. Obviously, that ended up being a 6-4 loss facing Corbin Burns. Uh, his first time, obviously, facing the Brewers in his career, and obviously since the trade as well. Brewers had a lot of loud contact in this game. They had a lot of base runners. Despite that, Burns ended up with an okay line. He went 5 innings, 3 runs, 2 earned, though it was his own error that caused the unearned run, which, as a pitching coach and former pitcher, is the dumbest thing in the world to me. If it's your error, you should still get an earned run, in my opinion, because you earned the run. Um, but they're never going to change that because then they'd have to go back and change all of baseball history. So they're never going to start calling it that way. But it's kind of dumb that you can save yourself an earned run by just throwing a ball down the line. He had 5 strikeouts as well, but we could talk quickly about the offense in this one because William Contreras started the game with a leadoff home run. By the way, William Contreras batting leadoff in that game. I like that, actually. Pretty interesting to me. I remember when Yasmani Grandal used to lead off for the Brewers at times. Guy who hits the ball hard, gets on base quite a bit. Williams a much faster runner and more athletic person than Yasmani Grandal was, so you at least have a little bit of speed on the bases. But I enjoyed that decision, and he obviously made it pay off right away with that homer off of Burns, which is the first leadoff home run of Burns' career. He had never given one up to the leadoff hitter, which is, considering what we went through in 2019, he must have given one up to every other spot in the lineup the first time through the order that year, but he didn't do it to the leadoff hitter. So, and that was also Contreras' first leadoff home run of his career. Obviously, hasn't spent much time there. I'm going to toss this one to you after, but Blake Perkins hit his second homer of the season. He has looked quite solid at the plate so far, and we know everything he brings in the field, and he's fast. I mean, he's up there in sprint speed and percentile, and he seems like a pretty good base runner. Is he working his way into some kind of a spot where he's going to be really hard to take off the roster, even when Mitchell is healthy and everybody's healthy?
Yeah, I mean, he seemed like the obvious one to quote unquote the weakest link out of all of them, maybe talent wise or whatever the case may be. You can make a resume for the other players and why they should stay. But what's funny about him is the right-handed bat for him is probably why he was on the roster in some small way. I mean, obviously he brings everything else, the fourth outfielder stuff. It doesn't really matter how he hits, but um, he's been really good from the left side, which now makes it like, well, we got to keep playing this guy. And you're not going to not take him out of the lineup, certainly. And then after this, we'll talk about all the moves that we've made. And now there's going to be at least a little bit of breathing room to where he's going to get a chance now for sure. But yeah, I mean, if he's bringing the defense that he's bringing, hitting from both sides of the plate, it started out with him just making, I wouldn't even say great contact, but just doing everything right as a hitter. And then now it seems like he's making hard contact and actually doing things that we didn't expect him to do. So if it were up to me, I'd keep playing him for sure. And like I said, it's coming from the left side of the plate, which is the complete opposite of maybe I felt like I liked his left-handed swing better anyways, but you just didn't think you'd see him in the lineup as a lefty really. And now you might.
Yeah. The power stroke in the past has been as a righty coming up. So seeing the pop from the left side is pretty encouraging for sure.
Hmm.
Um, but on the unfortunate side of the offensive explosion we've been going through, it kind of felt like a day like this was due to happen soon. And the Brewers did go 2 for 17 with runners in scoring position. Like I said, they were quite literally hitting almost 500 over the course of 3 series in a row with runners in scoring position. That is very unsustainable. There's no way they were going to continue to do that every game. In fact, it's absolutely insane that it lasted as long as it did. You felt like there was a regression game coming. Hopefully, it doesn't carry into a regression series in that regard, but
Hmm.
it could happen because they were at an abnormally high success rate with guys in scoring position. They were pretty much scoring a run almost every time they had an opportunity to do so.
Yeah.
So this one, it ended up not going their way in that regard, but it was really good to see them put Corbin on the ropes a number of times.
Hmm.
Um, Anyone who has listened to this podcast knows my feelings on Corbin Burns. I I will say this. He has started very well. His first two starts were fantastic. He was fine in this Brewers game, but the Brewers showed what can happen when you have a plan of approach against Burns, a plan of attack, I should say. He actually threw the cutter quite a bit less than he had as a Brewer in this game. But the Brewers were still just going up there and going, okay, cutter curveball, because he still isn't going to mix many of his other pitches in very often. I think the American League will eventually adjust to him, and you'll start seeing some tough starts the same type of starts that he had with the Brewers. He's going to be a good pitcher. He's going to have a good season. Um, I think it was a sign that like a team who knows Corbin a little bit better than some of the teams who haven't faced him are going to be able to get out and jump on him and maybe hit a homer or two and jump on him for some extra base hits, and it'll be the same type of formula that cost him at times with the Brewers. And again, just to take it back to the DL Hall thing, I think everyone needs to just kind of let this play out. Remember, DL Hall has 6 years of control left on his deal, and same with Ortiz. And Burns expires after the season. Even if Burns has a better season than both of them, which I would anticipate he probably will, since he's the one who's been an all-star already, and those two are rookies. Even if that happens, you have to let the play or the trade kind of continue down the road. And we've seen it before with Brewers trades. I mean, we're kind of already seeing it with even the Hunter Renfroe trade, how people gave up on that after Jansen Junk's first start, and then Elvis Peguero became one of our most important relievers last year. Like sometimes you gotta let stuff play out a little bit, not just completely overreact to the first couple weeks of a season. Um, but yeah, Gunnar, did you have any thoughts on Burns and what the Brewers were able to do?
Yeah, we put a good amount of good swings, like you said, against him. He just couldn't scratch it off. The last little part needed, we had, I want to say, 3 straight innings at least of a guy in third or second and third, less than 2 outs, and he just could not get that next big hit. I should have pointed this out though with Blake Perkins. I had this written down and to talk about in this game, which I want to say Sal was on first, stealing second, and he stopped, obviously, to not get tagged, and then Perkins stole home, which was fun to see. It's a little D3 baseball we got to see for people who don't get to watch it all the time. That's stuff that we would do. To scratch off a run when you can't really get that next hit, or you need to get runs against, you mentioned it, an All-Star Cy Young Award winner. No matter if we like him or not like him, our feelings are, it doesn't matter at that point. He is very good, and we could not get that next run. So any way you can get runs, we'll take it. But yeah, he's good. I understand that. Our hits, we probably had the game plan approach. It's funny that it did come off of William to start it out because he's very familiar with Corbin. He probably got used to him yelling at him because he wants to throw cutters nonstop or whatever the case is.
Well, he didn't
Um,
throw to William very often because he demanded that Victor
yeah,
Caratini catch him.
well,
So I'm sure William enjoyed that homer quite a bit when he hit it.
yeah. But yeah, that's, we did good against him. I'm proud of the fight for sure. For me, the story though was flipping over to our side pitching wise, even in this one, because we did make it a game considering all of that. It was still 3-3 at that point. Maybe 4-3 whenever
When Blake
Uribe
hit the
came.
homer, it became
Yeah,
4-3.
yeah.
Yep.
And then Uribe came in and did not look great to me again. Um, Man, he's gonna be, I mean this in the best way possible. He's gonna be frustrating to watch this year because he is so high. You know the talent's there. Everything looks good. It's, to me, it's just more of that location for him last game. Um, I also didn't love when Chris Hook came out. I think they just scraped 1 run across at that point, and he came out to calm him down, and he was not making eye contact with him, and he was getting like, our Chris Hook was getting pretty animated with him and like patting him on the chest, like, "Hey, like it's not over yet. You can still get out of this one." And that's going to be the stuff that's going to be, again, frustrating in a good way. He's going to have amazing days where he's striking out 6 and 2 innings. Who knows? It's possible. So, um, one of those where, again, you want your best pitcher out there, it doesn't work out, and you lose. But you had 1, 2 out of 3 this series. So, how did you feel about him in particular, and how did you feel about maybe the bullpen our last podcast as well? Um, do you think that Pat maybe has changed his style a little bit in which he's, do you like the way that he's using the bullpen now? Because that was a hot topic, I guess, is maybe a better way to put it.
Yeah, I thought the last week went better for him in terms of bullpen usage. I do think it was a sign that Abner's not really locked into that closer spot, which I think is the correct decision.
Mhm.
I frankly I wouldn't lock anyone into it, but I do think there's a decent chance Trevor McGill ends up taking that role if and when he comes back um, pretty soon, I would imagine. But with Abner, yeah, it's definitely location. I remember we got a question towards the end of the offseason about how Abner, it was basically leading into like, could Abner break out and be one of the best relievers in baseball? And my answer was that yes, he can, but that there's also a lot of concerns with the way, not just the command, but like you were touching on mentally, I've always been a bit afraid that he might fall apart. And I think I don't think this is a genuine problem that we're going to have to be super concerned about, but I do think that from night to night, there's a possibility of him falling apart mentally and just having a bit of a meltdown. And it did look a little bit like that in this third game of the series. He was missing spots, like you said. He wasn't really handling it well. I'll be honest, when he came up last year, he performed much better than I expected him to. Um, I expected a few more blowups and a few more times where he might lose control of his emotions, lose control of his pitches, which we saw once or twice, but we didn't see it very much. And it seems like we might be seeing it this year instead. So there is such thing as a sophomore slump. It would not shock me if he goes through one, but I also think that for the most part, the stuff is pretty much the same as it was last year. The two seam is it's got a little bit less horizontal movement than it did last year, which could be playing a role in terms of missing barrels a little bit more often, or at least what you'd be hoping would be a little bit more often. But it's I think it's still there. You'd like to see more strikeouts with the stuff he has. Um, we'll see. He's kind of a wait and see guy. It would not. I'll say it this way: it wouldn't shock me if he completely figures it out. It wouldn't shock me if we see him in Nashville at some point this year, because I do think there's that big of a wide range of outcomes for his season with the stuff he has and with his mental approach to everything. And then another struggling reliever we should probably quickly touch on is Hobie Milner. He was fantastic last year. I think everyone kind of knew there was a chance of some pretty big regression, but also most of the peripheral stuff showed him as being legitimately good last year. Like not
Oh yeah.
lucky, but legitimately good. The concern being when you have the stuff he does, you have to be pretty perfect and you can't afford to make many mistakes. Frankly, the home run he gave up to Cowser again, Colton Cowser. By the way, Colton Cowser has like a 1500 OPS still right now at this point in the season. That guy is mashing. The home run he gave up, lefty lefty, was an inside corner pitch up near the waist, and he just turned on it. And I don't, I mean, he's hot. It's hard to be too upset with what Hobie did there. I think you could go back to the Brett Beatty homer. He threw it exactly where it was supposed to be, but that makes me worried that the stuff is just not playing well enough anymore. Where hitters, even when he's hitting spots, are getting barrels to it and hitting the ball hard. He deserves more time as well, but I think people do have to remember he does have an option. He is able to be sent down. It would not shock me if he also spends a little bit of time in Nashville, which would suck because he was awesome last year. I was expecting him to be a pretty big part of this bullpen, but at the moment, it would not shock me if we saw him continue to struggle a bit and then end up in Nashville, where the Brewers do have a lot of up and down options that they can use. And I going into the season, I would not have expected Uribe or Hobie to be down in Nashville, but at this point in the season, if you told me they were by the end of April, it would not shock me. So sucks to see those two kind of struggling. We should quickly probably give Colin Ray some love though, because he had another very, very Colin Ray esque start. 5 2/3 innings, 3 earned runs, 6 strikeouts. That's a really good lineup, and to hold them in check through 5 2/3 is it's not a small feat. I mean, he's been very, very good so far this year. I mean, 3 starts, just really doing his job. He's doing exactly what you expect out of Colin Ray. Just constantly goes out there and competes and gives your team a chance to win, and that is all you can ask for from a guy like that. So give him a little shout out. Gunnar, you got anything else you want to talk about in regards to that game or the series as a whole?
No, I mean first with Colin Ray, I guess I'll just give quick little tidbits here. It was a ace showdown really on Sunday. Very similar stats to Corbin Burns. Someone had a funny tweet of Colin Ray versus Corbin Burns, and if you close your eyes or squinted a little bit, it looked like it was actually going to be an ace showdown. But he's been incredible this season. Um, I mean, you, Jack, pretty much called that one. That was probably your best take. Both of you guys this offseason was saying how good he would be. Um, we knew he'd be solid, but he might be better than solid. I don't think he's gonna be this good all year for sure, but he might be legit solid. So, and that's something that we need. With Hobie, I still think he looks better than maybe I first thought in that even that Mets series. Like is the much as far as we've seen him in this last week plus, he's for sure struggled, but I think he's still producing somewhat of soft contact. Um, I believe last time I looked, he was producing. This is off my memory, but I tried Googling while you're talking. But I think he had a good ground ball rate too. So it's just that location, like you said, the fastball, whatever it is, it's that one pitch where you just cannot put it there with him when you're not throwing very fast. And you're so much based on location with you. And you're not getting guys out so much with your stuff. I know it's maybe not the best word because he does have great stuff. He's got great spin rate, all that stuff, but he's not overpowering guys, I guess I should say. So um, I still believe in him. He should probably get a leash a little bit longer, I would say. I'm not hitting the panic button on him for sure, but yeah, it's slightly concerning. I'm excited for Brian Hudson. At least we got another lefty option along with that because last year um, it was Hobie Miller, and then you're looking around like who's the next lefty? I mean, we're thank God this guy's amazing, but you need somebody else too. So I'm glad we got another option.
Yeah, I agree. I do think people have to remember Hobie did have some struggles with the long ball in 2021. I want to say that was when the
Hmm.
first year he came up with the Brewers. It was a big problem. Like it just almost a historic rate of giving up home runs, and then everything else looked good. Like he was. That was why a guy like Jack, I kind of gave up on Hobie. Jack was pretty insistent that like he's gonna figure it out and he's gonna be an important part of the pen. I will say, having talked to Jack the other day, he's not quite as confident in Hobie anymore, so that worries me a bit because I do trust his judgment quite a bit on that stuff. But he did also say it's pretty early, and we got to just see how it plays out a little bit more for him. So I guess that's an older guy that's been struggling. We talked about Uribe a little bit, but there's been some other younger players that have been struggling, and we're going to talk about those guys next. We already talked about Uribe a little bit. I think we're probably good on where we are with him, but there's three more names we kind of want to touch on here, and we'll start with the biggest one, honestly, right now, and that's Jackson Chourio. So, Gunnar, before I give any of my thoughts on this, what are you thinking so far? I mean, I think we in some ways knew that there was quite a bit of luck involved at the beginning of the year, but what are you seeing from him? Kind of maybe what do you think the causes of some of these struggles? And too early to worry, early enough to worry? Are you concerned about Chourio at all?
Definitely too early to worry. The biggest reason in the cause is his age, of course. It's easy to say that he's the best player amongst all the young guys, and you forget that he's 20 years old, the youngest player still in baseball. He played the second youngest over this last weekend, but um, I still I think he has such raw abilities still, and he's with that. You got to figure it out even more than somebody who we'll talk about some of these other guys later. I'm trying to allude to it, but I always talk about guys who like walk. I feel like Chourio is not a free swinger in that aspect, but I also feel like he's a guy who gets in like rhythms like that. And he really tries to produce hitting wise. And early in the season, you mentioned the luck. I feel like he was putting himself in good counts and good situations, and he was hitting the ball in perfect spots. I just feel like he was a good hitter, but also that is a little bit of luck. Um, he's not doing very well hitting the ball hard right now. He is chasing, which that's something that I thought, which is hilarious after that first series. I'm like, well, the good thing is I don't think he's chasing that much. And then pretty much ever since I said that, it has not looked good in that category, even by the eye test. And it says he's 16th percentile here, chasing wise, striking out. I wouldn't be that concerned with that. That seems to me like, again, that's an adjustment thing. I'm not that worried about it. He was never that much of a huge walker. I would say he's probably average in that category anyways. Um, that type of stuff, again, I think that all evens out once you start evening out the luck. He hits the ball harder. He's a good hitter. I'm holding on to it's the home runs, it's the harder hits that we've seen so far, but that potential is absolutely insane. And why you signed up for this in the long run, you knew it was going to be a long project. You signed up in December, whenever it was, early December, because you knew he was going to be on the opening day roster and he was going to play throughout this season. You're signing up for whatever that is. So, um, if it does look like a Bryce Terang type season, I don't even think it's going to be that bad as far as offensive goes last year. But we've seen that we can make it work if there's one guy in our lineup who's like that. He's bringing it defensively. His fielding run value, it's 93 percentile. He's cleaned that up in that category too. Maybe we should talk about that as far as his IQ, I guess, on defense is maybe the best way to put it. There's been a couple plays. I want to say it was the Cincinnati series, maybe it was Mariners, where some of that stuff where he would airmail it to third base, the lack of better words, or airmail it home, whatever the case may be, and the guy bumps up a base. There was a couple times where he was able to hit the cutoff and we got a guy out at third. Just being a lot smarter out there in general. So I'm definitely not concerned with him at all. I've mentioned my concerns with him as far as the chasing, I guess, in the off season, and I was excited because I didn't see that much when he first came up. You think it would have been the opposite, but he's just getting used to it right now. And yeah, I think swing wise, I really want to be wrong in this. I feel like he does get off balance a good amount of times, and then I've seen it work so much in the minor leagues where I feel like I'm going to be wrong about this. This is why I don't want to be that hard on the take, but I'm just like I think he just needs to be relaxed a little bit more, and that's going to come with just timing and everything else, hitting the ball hard. Once he gets in the groove, he's probably going to have the same exact swing, and it's going to be looking fine. So that's why I don't want to harp on it too much. It just looks bad right now because it is not going well results wise. But give him a little bit of break. We did do that. We sat him Sunday, and then home series coming up here against the Padres. So yeah, I'm definitely not concerned with him, and hopefully he can get it going soon.
Yeah. I think you're pretty spot on with everything. Obviously seeing him most of the time his hard contact has been in the air, which I think is a good thing. It's a
Hmm.
good sign that when he is getting the timing right, he's going to do some damage. It's more about currently just not being on time very often. I think he's struggling with some of the spin. It's better than what he's seen at the minor league level for the most part. For anybody who watched him as much as I did at Double A last year, this is not that dissimilar from his start at Double A,
Oh
where
yeah, that's a good point.
pretty much every time he hit the ball hard, it was a home run. And other than that, he was struggling. He had a lot of soft hit balls. He had a lot of infield hits when he got
Hmm.
hits. And then he adjusted. And in the second half, he blew up. And I think like this is still a tiny sample right now. And you've seen some good things from him. Like you talked about, Gunner, the defense has been a lot better than I was anticipating and right after that first series because it looked pretty uncomfortable. I think he took to it very quickly. He's very fast. He plays a solid outfield. His arm is probably better than I think people were expecting it to be. We talked about the elbow thing and why I think it was bound to be better than that because, you know, he was holding back in the minors, and now that he's in the majors, they're letting him let it rip when he makes his throws. But the bat's just going to take time. It's going to take time. And I do agree that right now he is definitely getting off balance a decent amount. He's kind of spinning off a ball sometimes. You can almost see him in his heels as he's finishing his swing at times.
Hmm.
And he, that's not abnormal for any hitter to have it happen once in a while. We see William Contreras spin himself out once in a while, and guys like that do that. I think Willie Adames had a pretty long stretch last year where he was doing it actually, and it was a big
Oh yeah.
reason why he was struggling. But for Chourio, like you said, he's not only he is still the youngest in MLB. Holiday's still older than him. Um, he would also be the youngest player at AAA right now. He would also be the youngest player at one of the AA leagues right now. So there are two AA leagues. One of them he wouldn't be. There's a 19-year-old there, but otherwise he would be the youngest player in AA as well. So we're talking about a guy who's way ahead of his peers in terms of development and getting to the majors. And this is why I warned at times during the offseason that you have to be patient and you have to expect struggles. You're going to see flashes. We've seen flashes. We've seen him hit a home run to right center. We've seen him turn on one to hit it to left. We've seen the defense. We've seen the speed. We've seen what he can do and drive the ball to all fields. But it's going to come in waves right now. And hopefully, as pitchers have adjusted to him, hopefully we start seeing some of those adjustments back. And he's never going to be a big walk guy, but I do think he's capable of being a average in terms of taking walks somewhere in that 7 to 8% range, which is pretty. That's around the middle of the league. I think he's capable of that. I think he's capable of striking out closer to 20% than 30%. It's just going to take time. He will always chase. I don't think he's going to ever be a guy who has a great chase rate, but he's going to be a guy who makes contact a lot on pitches that are out of the zone because of the bat speed that he has and the bat control that he has. But it's going to take time, and we're going to have to be patient with it. Um, I'm not worried. at all right now. In fact, honestly, in a lot of ways, he's been a little better in some ways than I expected him to be early on. I didn't know if we'd see any of the power early. I thought he might just kind of be reaching out, trying to hit balls to the opposite field, which we did see at times, and then obviously that hasn't worked as well lately. But I'm pretty encouraged by the way he's handling everything, by the way he's showing at least signs of all of the potential that he has, which is huge. It's huge potential. Um, but the other name here is the one we mentioned earlier in his start against the Orioles, DL Hall. He has been struggling, and I would say the Mariners start felt like a really good step in the right direction. I thought that went really well for him. The numbers were worse than his Mets start, but I thought he pitched much better in that one. He had a lot of bad luck, a lot of bad at ball luck, a lot of bad. Even when he was hitting spots, they were just doing their job kind of at times. But if you look at the Orioles start and you're starting to look at the fastball metrics and everything on him, he's in a bad spot, and there's something that's wrong with it. And some people are saying, oh, the velo was a product of the bullpen. And in a way, yes, I do think so. He was not going to throw 99 or touch 99 as a starter. That would have been it would have been kind of silly to expect that from him. But I was expecting 94 to 95 most of the time, maybe reaching back for 97. And if you look back at his spring training starts, the one that was on StatCast, that's where he sat. He did touch 97 in that game, and his average fastball was about 95. Something changed at the end of March, and I don't know what it is, but this was a huge, every scouting, like Fangraphs, Baseball America, MLB Pipeline, everyone had a 70 or an 80 on his fastball, which is an elite pitch. And right now it's garbage. Personally, I am not going to believe that the 3 games this year are more indicative of what his fastball is going to be moving forward than pretty much the rest of his pro career. Maybe he completely lost it. It would be a very, very weird thing to have happen and very uncommon for that to happen. But right now he's sitting 92.6, and that's not going to work on its own. But he's also lost some of the carry that he's getting. Before he was at 15.2 inches of induced vertical break, and now it's 13.5. That doesn't sound like a ton, but that inch and a half could be the difference between a pop-up and a barrel. And right now they're barrels. All of them are. And he's not really locating it well. It's been down in the zone a decent amount. He needs to get it up in the zone more often. But with that pitch shape, that's kind of a dead zone fastball. It's not a good shape to have. 15.3 isn't great either, which is what it was. But he has a very good vertical approach angle. So even though it doesn't get a ton of carry, it's very much like Freddie Peralta's fastball before this year when Freddie has upped his vertical, upped his carry on his fastball quite a bit this year. But before it was around 15 to 16 in the same range that Hall was before. And instead they've kind of gone the opposite direction with the metrics. But if Hall just figures things out a little bit in terms of, my guess is this is a very it'd be such a simple fix that it sounds like it feels like it can't be the problem, but it's a common issue with younger pitchers or lower levels of pitchers. If you're choking the ball, meaning gripping the ball too hard because you're trying to throw hard, you're gearing up to do something. It's the same with swinging a bat, really.
Oh, yeah.
If you gear up too much, you actually go long. It takes longer for you to get going. So I wonder if he's kind of choking it would kill a little bit of the spin, which will decline that vertical break that he isn't getting now. And it can kill the velo a little bit. And it's one of those things that you can't really pick up as a pitching coach or anybody. You have to kind of recognize it as a pitcher because there's no way for you to tell from visually that he's just gripping the ball harder than he normally would. So I'm curious if that's the thing. The only reason I think that is because nothing else has changed. His extension's the same. His release point's the same. Maybe he's just not getting into his legs well enough or something. You never know. There might be more mechanical things, and I am not good enough to break down the difference between 3 miles per hour and a major league pitcher. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be doing this podcast. I'd probably be working for somebody right now. But so, I mean, in terms of looking at, I have tried to go side by side, I will say. I haven't noticed anything. It doesn't seem much different to me. So that's why I kind of think maybe that is what's causing it. There's also the possibility that there's a mental issue going on with him right now in terms of saying okay, I need to go deeper into starts. So I got to be able to save some in the tank. And that wouldn't be a new thing either. There's been a lot of players who have gone from reliever to starter and have had that issue before. Maybe that's the issue for Hall too. But either way, if he can get back to that 95 on his fastball, and I would assume if he does, the carry's going to come back with it. I think he's going to be just fine. His breaking balls are both good pitches. His changeup's taken a step forward this year. It's actually been quite good this year. I'm still not worried about Hall. And again, like I said earlier, I think people are overanalyzing what's happened so far because of the trade that he was involved in. And I think we got to give it some time and let him see and let him figure things out as a starter and let him adjust to new surroundings, to a new team, to a completely new role in the major leagues. Like there's so many new things going on with him. We got to give it some time. But Gunnar, what have you noticed? I know pitching's not necessarily your forte, but what have you noticed with Hall?
Yeah, you said a bunch of smart words, so I'll be quick as far as breaking it down like you did. But um, I feel like I was actually more spot on. We probably were pretty close, shockingly, even though that was just in my head. But I think my only explanation really is the dumbed down version is what you mentioned towards the end of him adjusting to being a starter, but it's a whole different ball game when you're in the major leagues doing it. And we saw it in spring training, whole lot less pressure. You get to let it fly. You know you're on a shorter leash. Of course, towards the end, though, even he was getting up to 4 or 5 innings. I don't remember what he ended up getting at, but um, that's my really only explanation. You mentioned the extension too. People probably have heard the word perceived velocity, which, regardless, he's still 3 miles an hour slower than he actually is. 2, 3 miles an hour doesn't really matter, but so technically, I guess it might look like 95. I'm not good at math. I don't know how that they even do that, but still, he's still slower regardless. It should look like 98. Um, but I've seen a lot of people on both sides of the pendulum comparing this. You mentioned earlier to 2019 Corbin Burns. I don't think it's going to be that bad because I think Corbin was very stuck in his ways. Obviously, it's something that we talked about a lot. Um, Corbin was coming off of 2018 in the bullpen, very similar to DL Hall, which was with the Orioles, where he got a lot of success at a young age. Right when he comes up, all this stuff looks great. He gets to do what he wants because it's a shorter stint. And then you go to the starters, and then now guys figure you out once they see you one time through the lineup, twice through the lineup. Corbin was also getting shelled pretty early in games, so I'm not even sure that was really it for him. But it's the same type of adjustment period, I think, too. But like I said, I don't think it's going to be that bad. But I guess the thing that I'm holding on to in comparison to that is we've only gotten smarter when it comes to pitchers, it feels like. And it's not giving DL Hall enough credit. I mean this with respect, but he's almost like a vessel for the Brewers in the best way to put it. Like we are gotten so much smarter where we're going to lead him into the best way possible. Like, hey, this is what you've been doing wrong so far this season. Velocity's on him, obviously. I don't know what he needs to do to figure that. We probably got stuff to figure that out too, I'm sure. But we're going to put him in better spots to locate his fastball, change stuff up, whatever their secret sauce is, we know what to do. We're even smarter, like I said, than 5 years ago. So I'm a lot more calm than watching 2019 Corbin Burns for sure. I guess I just want to know your thoughts on that when it comes to the comparison directly with that version of Corbin Burns, because maybe the ERA stats might look somewhat similar right now, but it doesn't feel like that bad compared to that, because we've seen positive signs. But what are your thoughts when people compare that?
Yeah, I think Burns was. I will say, I thought 2019 Burns pretty much had the worst luck you could possibly have, wherein every mistake he made got hit out. And it was
Yeah.
kind of incredible how that happened because that's really not how it normally works. Also, I'm looking over at my TV screens quickly here, and Joe Ross is sitting 97 with his sinker right now, and I don't really know how to explain that. So sorry if I get a little distracted here. That's shocking me at the moment.
Spencer just starts crying. That's why too.
But in terms of Hall, I think we got to talk about like with the Burns comparison. I do think it's different circumstances because Burns' stuff was good that whole time. Like
Hmm.
he just had bad command, and then the fastball itself was so straight, and he wasn't locating it up. So then he got hit, and then he obviously learned the cutter, and we know where everything went from there. But with Hall, some of the stuff has looked good, like I talked about. The off speed's been fine. I think the slider's been lacking a little bit too, in comparison to what we've seen from it in the past. But it is coming. It's just going to come down to this fastball being the pitch it has been in the past. It wasn't a case of like Corbin regressing in his stuff like we've kind of seen with Hall. Hall, it's more, okay, we know you're capable of throwing your stuff better than this. So now we just got to find a way to do it consistently. And I will say, again, even in terms of comparing them, it's still different too, because Burns was doing it with the same team that he was just pitching in the pen with.
Yeah.
He was doing it in a comfortable setting with the same manager, same teammates, same people who just went to the NLCS with him the year before. And it has not been that way for Hall. Obviously, it's a completely different set of circumstances. So I get the comparison, and I think there's definitely something to be learned from not overreacting to what happened with Burns. Um, like we saw, I mean, I love going back sometimes and looking at tweets from 2019 when people genuinely wanted to cut Corbin Burns with options. They said, just get rid of him. We don't want him anymore. Fans were just completely fed up. He won Cy Young 2 years later. Like, that's how quickly things can get figured out and things can be adjusted. And they can be even faster than that because, again, Hall has pitched 3 times for the Brewers so far. Like, we got to just give it some time. But back to the offensive side here, we got a question from Steven Anderson, and we're going to touch on one who has not been disappointing in terms of the young guys so far, and then a guy who's starting to fade a little bit from what we saw right away at the beginning of the season. But Steven Anderson asked about Bryce Terang. He said he's cut his whiff rate in half. He has a 101 deserved rated runs created plus and an expected weighted on base average approaching league average. Do we believe, Gunner?
I would say I believe more than if you heard me talk in the offseason. I think his swing, I guess it's hard to explain. I feel like he had a lot of movement last year and he cut down almost all of it this season. It feels like he shortened everything up. I hate that phrase because it's just a very lazy way of saying stuff, but he really has shortened up everything. Not a lot of shake in his swing, but he also, I mentioned earlier before the year, it felt like he just was really harping on trying to make contact and make good contact, which um, that's good. It's something to work off of for him. I mean, you're on zero, the bottom of the league, and you just need somewhere to build off of. And I think it's a good place to build off of. It feels like a lot of his hits and stuff, it's not lucky hits this year. He is putting good swings on the ball. And yeah, I believe in a lot more than I would have. I still don't believe it for 162 games, but I think if he can just be, we mentioned it a million times, I hate repeating myself, but um, he just needs to be better than he was last year in offense, in the rawest of terms. And then his defense is still there. Obviously, we've seen a bunch of great plays, but offensively, I do believe more than I did before. But I guess quickly, Spencer, I'll go to you before we go to Oliver Dunn. Do you believe in Bryce Turang?
I would pretty much steal the words right out of what you said and say more than I did, for sure. I do think that he has made strides. And like Steven laid out for us, even the actual peripheral stats and some of the ones that take into account, the actual ability to hit the ball on a line or hit a ball in the right with a little bit behind it. I mean, he's made improvements. And the big thing is the whiff rate being down as far as it is cut in half. And that's a big deal when you're not a power hitter. You can't be a slap hitter who doesn't make contact. That's a very, very bad combination. Yeah. And like you said, it's a very simple way to say it, but it definitely looks quicker to the ball. It's shortened up. It looks like he's got an ability to at least just get the bat to pitches, even if they're not necessarily in a spot where he's comfortable. He's not whiffing on fastballs in the zone hardly at all this year. And last year, he did it at an alarming rate, just an unbelievably high rate. So it's definitely improved. But to take it to another infielder, lefty infielder, guy that we both definitely have been high on, Oliver Dunn, as Steven points out here, is starting to come down. Well, I'd say he's back down to earth and maybe a little bit below at this point. He has definitely started struggling a little. He's down to an 80 deserved runs created plus and a 282 expected weighted on base average. So if you take a look at his Baseball Savant page, you're going to see quite a bit of whiffs. He is definitely swinging and missing more than I expected him to. He's still hitting the ball pretty hard when he makes contact, but he hasn't really elevated many of those batted balls. Gunnar, what are you seeing from him right now? And then are you concerned? Do you think this is a sign that maybe the league figured him out? And obviously, normally you wouldn't say that with a prospect, but I would say as a 26-year-old, there is a little bit less of like wiggle room for him to readjust than there would be for like a Chourio or even Terang last year as a 23-year-old. Like the older you get, the less time you have to adjust to these things. So, well, how are you feeling about Ollie Dunn right now?
I feel good. He had to come back down to earth at some point. It's obviously been pretty bad recently, but I think he's chasing for sure. It seems like he's in one of those funks that's hard to explain unless you played baseball, which I'm sure a lot of people have who listen to this. But um, he takes it seems like he takes a lot of pitches that he should be hitting, and then he's swinging at stuff that he shouldn't be swinging at. So he's in one of those weird stretches where I think he's trying to make something happen and just also guessing wrong. A guy who normally walks, his walk rate is pretty low at this point too, so he's probably trying to be very picky with what he swings at. And it's completely opposite of what he's probably actually wanting to do. That being said, though, like you said, he's still hitting the ball hard on average normally. Um, just needs to hit it in the air and actually make better contact as far as getting it up in the air. Maybe that's part of him chasing after balls, trying to get it up in the air, doing things that maybe he's not used to doing. Um, but I expected him to strike out a good amount probably. Um, and yeah, I mean, I believe in him. I believe in guys who hit the ball hard. Um, he gets on base. He's a very fast runner, which is again something I mentioned in spring training that you mentioned the on base percentage. Just like Bryce Turang, I would want to see him get on base. Another guy who can run too, and bat the top of the lineup when he's going well. I think maybe some of that has some truth to it too. He got hot, and then we threw him right at the top of the lineup, which totally deserved. He deserved it too. But also, oh my God, I've got so much thrown at me. Like you said, I'm a rookie still. I'm 26, but like I'm still getting used to this, just like everybody else is. So, it's kind of just shuffling the cards a little bit with all of our young guys and trying to get everybody in grooves. Who's hot, put him at the top of the lineup. If they're not, put that guy down, put him back up. So, um, nothing I've seen to where I feel like he's hopeless at the plate. It's just I think he's in one of those baseball funks. It really does feel like that, because he's hitting the ball hard, like I said, and doing everything else right. I guess is maybe the best way to put it. But once we start seeing him he needs to always have a picky eye. I just want it to be calibrated a little bit. You got to calibrate the everyone who grew up maybe around our age. We had those smart boards in elementary school. You got to just he's got to go to the strike zone and hit every corner of the strike zone and just practice that every day after every game so he knows what the strike zone is. But yeah, he'll be fine.
Yeah. I will say that the chase rate's still in the 81st percentile. He's doing a pretty good job. Like you said, he's not really attacking pitches out of the zone very often, but he has been pretty aggressive in terms of, or not very unaggressive in terms of pitches in the zone. And
Mhm.
the fact that he's not chasing, but also is whiffing at a very high rate, that is concerning because that's a little Terang like from last year, where Terang didn't chase too much last year, but he just couldn't make contact. I do think you got to just let this play out a little bit. Like you touched on, he's pretty much doing everything else well right now. His defense at third base has been really, really solid. He's been an above average defender. He's in the 87th percentile for sprint speed. Not exactly what you're expecting when you take a look at Oliver Dunn, but dude can kind of move. And he's hitting the ball hard. And like you said, I think those are all signs of a guy who can perform at this level. And he's struggling a little bit. He is adjusting. Like I said, you don't get as much time as a 26-year-old, but with all this stuff he's doing well, he definitely deserves an opportunity to continue to work through it and get used to the new way pitchers are attacking him versus what he was seeing when nobody really knew what to do with him when he first came up. So those four, Uribe, Chourio, Hall, and then Dunn, I think in terms of concern level, for me, I'd probably put Uribe at the highest level of concern out of the four. And then for Chourio, he's the lowest for me just because of, like you touched on, he's the youngest dude in the league. He's showing some good things. I'm not worried about that. But Uribe, I'm definitely a little bit of I got to see him start figuring some things out, start striking some people out. He's also the easiest guy, I think, of this group to send down. So that makes things a little bit easier, too, in terms of saying, like, hey, he's got to go down and work on command. And I don't think anyone's going to be upset or argue with that. So that's where I would be. But Gunnar, you mentioned earlier, and we forgot to touch on it, you have some fun offensive stats for us. So what do you got
Oh,
for us
I've
in
got
that
some pitcher
regard?
stats for you too. Don't you worry. I added some for you.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, I threw. I've when I was thinking over the weekend on Sunday night, I was like, we got to be doing really well in a lot of these categories. And like you said, it's easy to. Sorry, I'm watching the game. Something happened, but we're also off to a good hot start here in this one too. It seems like so against the Padres, as we record. But anyways, I was thinking about how we had a hot offense, and really after that weekend, I'm like, we got to be up there in stats. So I checked it out. Um, I had to throw this stat in first because what we were up in the top of it, obviously, and I know this would probably make some people happy after last season. We are second in batting average behind the Braves, which I don't care about that stat very much, but it does show how much we're hitting and it makes sense. Um, but we're also second in OPS, which is also what I care about most, and that's against the Braves or behind the Braves as well. Second in home runs this season, which um, we're hitting the long ball, which is something that we really, really wanted to do last season. We got guys like Hoskins, even our young guys that have surprised us hitting home runs. I think having more power in general, along with I'll talk about it now. We're third in steals. So if you have that plus home runs, getting on base, um, high guys who I'll talk about this stat. We're 20th in strikeouts. So guys who don't strike out, get on base, hit home runs. We're doing literally every part of the offense is what you want really right now. Everything's flowing right now. Like Spencer said, we're 2 weeks into the season. It's not going to be this good, but I do expect us to be in the upper half of the league this year. Once we're floating in water and once we get things going in July or whatever, I would not be shocked if we're still. I honestly, I don't think that strikeout thing is going to change much. I don't. This team doesn't really seem like teams in the past that all or nothing type of teams. And then sometimes even when we had that, we didn't really have that. We didn't have the home runs that we normally used to.
I was
We
gonna
had
say last year's team was more of a nothing or nothing team. They
right.
they weren't really hitting for power and they were striking out quite a bit. So
Yes.
yeah, this year's definitely different in that regard.
Yeah. So if we can have a better approach in that sense, I think we're doing everything right. And then sliding over to pitching, which I knew Spencer would want to hear about. Doesn't feel like it's been amazing so far. We definitely have gotten good bullpen appearances when we needed it. Starters have been pretty solid, but we're 11th in ERA. We're fifth in WHIP. But this is the kicker here, which is really not shocking to me at all. What you think about our staff, our rotation, our bullpen. We're 28th in strikeouts. And then we're also tied for fifth for giving up home runs. So um, I think that speaks perfectly again. I don't know if those stats will be perfect by the end of the season. That one feels the most realistic to me. I think we're going to get solid appearances out of guys, but it's not going to be super flashy. We expect DL Hall and guys like that to maybe uptick in strikeouts and whatnot, but we're not going to be a big strikeout team. That's really what it felt like at the beginning of the year. But we're going to be smart. We're going to limit home run damage. Or actually, we're tied for fifth most in home runs, I guess. That's the concerning part. So I think that one will come down for me, um, which is why I think we're probably seeing more struggling, but we're still 11th in ERA. We're still fifth in WHIP. So I think we're just that pinpoint accuracy maybe is not the best way to put it, but I think it's just that one pitch with a lot of guys that we can clean up and really make it more realistic for us, I guess, with those stats. But yeah, I mean, Spencer, do you want to overreact to any of those stats? I know the offense is looking really good right now, but pitching wise, I think that's pretty realistic.
Yeah, I don't think they'll be bottom three in terms of strikeouts by the end of the year. Guys like Freddie are going to continue to strike out a lot of batters. Like you mentioned, DL Hall, I think, is going to eventually start striking more guys out. I do think the pen has arms that are more capable of striking people out than they've shown so far. And then eventually you'll get Devin Williams back, who, if he's healthy and performing like he
Yeah.
has, will be striking out basically two an inning, which is what he's done for most of his career. Um, but I do think ERA wise, they're probably overperforming how they've actually pitched so far. But I also think they're underperforming in terms of what they're capable of. So I think around middle of the pack is about right for where they end up finishing in that regard. In terms of the offense, though, I think a top 10 offense is not out of the question. I don't think top 3 to 5, like I said, is very likely, but top 10 in terms of scoring runs, hitting some homers, stealing bases, all those categories, that all feels possible. And I don't know if I'd say probable on the top 10 offense, but I think it's pretty possible and a lot more possible than I thought it was the last few years. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to ask for much better. of a start from the offense. I just want to make sure people remember not to get not. Jack actually said this at one point too, but you got to remember that just because if they do start struggling, you got to remember they're not. That doesn't mean everything's changed and that they have a different approach or they're doing things differently. Some of it's just there's going to be stretches of bad luck. Right now has been a stretch of very good luck. There's going to be some bad luck stretches. There's going to be some times where guys are taking the same approach, but they just are a little off in the box and it doesn't work out. And you got to keep that in mind. It's a long season. There's going to be stretches of both of those things, but it's been very fun right now. And I guess we can move quickly to the injury updates and some of the moves that have been made the last few days. But you mentioned it. Most of that Orioles series, pretty much all but the first inning, were played without Christian Yelich. He is still sitting currently in this Padres series. Sounds like tomorrow's going to be the make or break day on whether they IL him or not. So we'll see what happens there, but he is dealing with lower back soreness. Same thing as last year. Little concerning for sure, but also I'm hoping they're just safe with him here. It's early in the season. Let's get him right and then get him back on the field and then make sure we're taking care of him. I think he's got to be on the Braun schedule these days where you have to build in rest days. Even if he's hot, even if you would love to keep him in the lineup, you got to find ways to get him rest. So I think that's where we got to go with that. In order to kind of fill, because the Brewers only have 4 outfielders on the roster prior to this, they did send down Andrew Monasterio, and Joey Weimer was brought back up just to kind of fill that last roster spot so that you're not playing with only 3 outfielders, because that's not a great place to be. JB Bukauskas went to the IL with a tricep injury. I mentioned that earlier, but that was unfortunate. He had been looking pretty solid. In response to that move, they called up left-handed pitcher Jared Koenig. He had struck out 8 in 4 1/3 innings in AAA. Kind of a journeyman lefty, but he's got decent stuff. He's like 93, 94 with a fastball and a sinker. Decent breaking ball, decent changeup. He made some changes this year. There was a pretty good article on him at Brewer Fanatic from Matthew Trueblood that you guys could go check out. Kevin Herget got DFA'd. He was on the roster for 1 day before Wade Miley was activated. Gunnar, what's your favorite Kevin Herget memory from his time as a Brewer?
Maybe his name.
Yep. Yeah, it's a good name. That's a good one. I don't even know if I'm saying it right, to be honest with you. I hope I am. And they also, in order to make room on the 40-man, moved Garrett Mitchell to the 60-day IL. Not a surprising move at all, but kind of surprised it took this long, honestly. But yeah, he is basically on track to return after around 60 days. So makes sense. And then in terms of the only other roster move they had, they claimed Corbin Martin off waivers from the Arizona Diamondbacks. Quick fun story about him. He was with J.B. Bukauskas in the trade from the Astros to the Diamondbacks for Zach Greinke. So the Brewers are trying to get every piece of that trade to touch their system at some point. We had Greinke. Now we've had both those pitchers. Ironically and somewhat sadly, we have not had Seth Beer, who was also involved in that trade and would be the best fit in terms of names for the Brewers. So we haven't seen that yet. But we did have one other question from a listener. Jake McKibben asked, what's made Eugenio Herrera take the leap? So just to give a little background on Herrera, he was actually a guy last year I pegged as kind of a breakout pitcher in the system. He started the year not very well. I shouldn't say that. He started the year injured, and then when he came back, he did not pitch very well. I kind of gave up on him not gave up on him completely, but started moving him down my list and paying a little less attention to him in late July or so. He finished the season pretty well. He had a solid stretch to end the year. And then this year, he's gotten off to a really good start. His most recent appearance, he went 4 innings out of the pen, 9 strikeouts, only 1 hit. And that was the only base runner. It was very, very impressive stuff. He sits like 93 to 95 with his fastball. He is only 20 years old at the moment. He made it to low A Carolina as an 18-year-old, which is a sign of how much the Brewers, how highly the Brewers were viewing him at the time. But now he's obviously in like his 2 full seasons with the Mudcats, and then he had half a season when he first came up. But the thing that seems to have taken the real big step here is the same thing that happened to him when he was in the Arizona League the year before, and that's he's throwing way more strikes. He's commanding the ball a lot better. He started doing it at the end of last year. The stuff has always kind of been there. He's got, like I said, 93 to 95 with the fastball. He can get a little bit higher than that. I don't really know any of the actual spin data or any of the movement, but based on watching it, it seems to play pretty well up in the zone. So I'd imagine it's got a decent amount of induced vertical break. or a pretty decent vertical approach angle. He's pretty high. His release is pretty high, so I doubt it's the approach angle. It's probably more of the spin and the break that he gets on it. But he also throws a pretty good curveball that I would say looks like it's taken a bit of a step. He's always had the changeup as his best secondary, and it's always been a very good pitch. From watching him in that last outing, though, the curve looks better than I had ever seen it before when I was watching him. And that could be a pretty big deal because two pitches that go the opposite way that are above average or better breaking balls would be pretty huge for a guy who, like I said, has the velo to get the job done. And he's only 20 years old, which means he's probably got a little bit more in the tank eventually, or he's got the possibility to keep adding some velo. So that's the big thing for me. I think his commanding pitch is better. I think the curveball's taken a step forward, and he just keeps getting a little older and maturing a little bit. And it isn't shocking that a guy who was 18 and 19 had his struggles at the low A level. It's a good reminder to me and to anybody who follows prospects that if you like a guy and he's really young at the level, you probably got to give him a little bit more leeway than you would for other people, which we already talked about with the Jackson Chourio situation right now. So, yeah, that's a good question from Jake. He's a guy that definitely Herrera is a guy that definitely goes under the radar. I'd say just in a long line of Brewers minor league pitchers that you got to keep an eye on because one, we know the Brewers develop pitching better than almost anybody, and two, they just keep finding talent in all different places all the time. And I mean, you never know where it's going to pop up. And I would imagine Herrera ends up in high A if he continues pitching like this, because like I said, he's been at low A for a little while. But yeah, he's off to a really good start. Hopefully we see it continue. Yeah, that's all we got for listeners and everything. So Gunnar, why don't you finish this off with your random Brewer?
I chose Neil Walker, and he was short-lived, but in 2017, very ingrained into my brain, probably because Spencer and I went to way too many games in late August, September of that season. Sometimes probably even cutting it close with our business classes, sprinting out of class, trying to make first pitch. But
Yeah,
our
that's right. We
priorities
went to
were,
those classes, Gunnar. We definitely went to the
yeah.
classes and
Oh,
didn't go to the Brewer game instead.
Yeah, but anyways, all of this to get our heart broken. That season we went to a lot of those games, but I remember a lot of those Cubs series, whatever. But Neil Walker was ingrained in my brain because he had a good stretch with us that season. I don't remember what the trade was, but we got him from the Pirates, obviously. But he did play extremely well. He was a big part of that run towards the end of that year. And yeah, I just that roster that season, the end of that year, it was our first sort of sniff back at competitive baseball since that's 2014. That was it was a different side of the season. Basically, we were competitive the first half, and then the end of that season was bad. But first time I really felt like we could make the playoffs, and then didn't happen until the next year. So I remember that year pretty vividly. So Spencer, who do you got?
Yeah, I do want to talk about Walker quickly because we did get him from the Mets in that trade. If you recall, he was front and center during the
It was the Mets.
yeah, yeah.
I thought it was the Pirates.
Nope. It was the
Oh,
Mets. He was kind of front and center during the Noah Syndergaard, Terry Collins mic'd up. Uh
oh yeah,
yeah, with the umpire. That was a
yep.
fun
No,
one.
I can see that scene. Yeah.
And well, now I got to see if Blake Perkins was actually out at third base. Give me 1 second here.
Blake Perkins is sitting probably 400 right now. He just got a base hit. So
I
I was
think he
trying to
was
think
out.
I was trying to think of like an alarm I could have set off when he got the hit, like a special buzzer we could push when Blake Perkins gets a hit. But
The Blake Perkins hit buzzer. Yeah, that would be, I think we could sell those. Um, no, I also went with somebody that was acquired in a trade. Obviously not super surprising. A lot of players are acquired in a trade, but ours was a pretty big trade. It was actually a guy we kind of talked about for a second there when we talked about Corbin Martin, and that was the Zach Greinke trade to the Angels. And I'm going with Johnny Helweg, who
call.
man, is his stat line depressing based on him being one of the bigger pieces in that trade. Um, I remember when he made his debut, I was pumped. I was really excited. He threw hard. He's a guy who had pretty good stuff. Unfortunately, if you look at his line as a Brewer, he pitched 30 innings, 30 and 2/3, I should say. He only struck out 9, which is horrific, very, very bad. He walked 26, which means he had a strikeout to walk ratio of 0.35, which is, again, just unbelievably bad. His whip was 2.152, very, very bad. He also hit 8 batters, which means in 30 and 2/3 innings, he gave up 34 free passes. That's not good. That's a lot. You don't want to have a much higher amount of free passes than innings, and you definitely don't want to have 4 times as many free passes as strikeouts. So he was terrible, but I do remember being very excited about him coming up. And hold on, did Jackson go deep? He did. He did.
Yes,
Jackson.
yes, he did.
Hey guys, we're watching the game right now. If you can't tell, Jackson Chourio just hit a 2-run homer.
Rewind our podcast, and we said that we were not at all worried about him.
Yep, keep that in mind. We may have also talked up Bryce Turang right before he hit into that bases loaded double play that you may remember, but we got the Chourio part right, so you can thank us all for that later. No, but back to the more important part of our podcast, which is just talking about Johnny Hellwig and needlessly ripping on his career when he really didn't do anything wrong. I kind of feel bad that I've gone down this road now. But yeah, it was pretty rough, and he never ended up making another major league appearance after those 8 games for the Brewers. So, Johnny, thank you for giving me some excitement in a time where the Brewers were not good. But
he was a tall guy. He was a tall guy, lengthy guy. I remember. And if he had a baseball savant page, it probably, as you laid out those stats, it would look pretty bad. But fastball velocity, very disappointing if you're that big and had that much size extension, probably. And he probably threw, I don't think he broke 90. I remember I was like, how does this guy not throw very hard? Maybe he did, but in my mind, I was like, this is such a waste of a body.
Yeah, it was. Maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I thought he had decent velo. He just had no idea where it was going. But I also mostly just remember his hair. He had pretty fun hair. He kind of had how would I describe it? It wasn't good hair, but it we gotta just stop this podcast right now, Gunnar. I don't even know what we're talking about right now, but I'm trying to figure out where he was at. Yeah, no, he was up to 98. So
he almost kind of looked like one of those guys you would see, like when they would speed it up for like Babe Ruth times. Yeah. Like when it looks like he looked, just by looking at him, he looks like he's from like the 1940s a little bit with his body. Like I said, the way that he threw his face, I don't know, something about that gives me that vibe.
Yeah, well,
I'm just trying to extend this podcast on purpose.
I might name this one the Rip on Johnny Hellwig episode or something. I don't know. I feel bad now. I almost want to cut some of this because he has no reason to hear all this hate. No, I'm sure he's a consistent.
Yeah, he was 6'9". He was 6. Yeah. Holy crap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same as his ERA.
Sure.
So, and even lower than his walks per 9. But all right, I'm done. I'm done being mean to Johnny Hellwig. Like I said, he probably listens to all our episodes and he's going to have to deal with this now. So
yeah,
I feel bad for him, but we'll wrap it up on that note after a bunch of rambling. If you made it through all of that and you're listening to the outro, I mean, you must be one of our best listeners. So thank you very much for sticking it through. Please like and subscribe on whatever platform you are on. Remember to follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod. And please feel free to leave feedback for us on how we can get better. Don't be as mean to us as we are to Johnny Hellwig, but you can still give us feedback. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.
See ya.